AITA for moving all my daughter's belongings to my parents' house and leaving nothing for my husband's affair kid.
Am I the asshole for this?
It all started last Saturday when my husband confessed something that completely shattered my world. He admitted to having an affair and even fathering a child. The child, a 9-year-old girl, was the product of this affair, and he informed me that her mother had experienced some sort of incident in the past couple of weeks, though I was too engulfed in a whirlwind of anger and disbelief to fully grasp the details. He told me that he needed to go and retrieve her from wherever she was, and I couldn't process it. All I could do was yell at him. At that moment, I was still trying to come to terms with this bombshell when my own daughter, who is 10, came to me in tears. She told me that my husband had told her she needed to share her room and her belongings with this girl, his affair child. My heart broke for her. I could see the confusion, the pain, and the betrayal in her eyes. She didn't deserve this. In my shock, I called my parents to explain the situation. They were appalled, of course, and immediately agreed that my daughter should not have to endure this. They suggested that she stay with them for the time being. We live in a small house with limited space, and I didn't want my daughter to feel like an outsider in her own home. So we decided that my son and I would stay at the house, and my daughter would move in with my parents. We packed up all of her things on Monday, and my parents, along with my sister, brother-in-law, and nephews, came to help. They not only assisted with the move, but also took the precaution of putting locks on my bedroom and my son's bedroom. The last thing I needed was for my husband to try to take over even those spaces. His things, including his clothes and personal items, were moved to the 4th bedroom, which he had been using as an office. It was a symbolic gesture of how things were changing. His place in our home had been diminished. Then yesterday, my husband came home, and with him, the girl, his daughter from the affair. When he saw that most of her belongings were gone, he immediately became enraged. He demanded to know why we had taken all of her things away and why we hadn't left any of it for her. To make matters worse, this child was from a much warmer climate, so she didn't have clothes suited for the colder northern weather where we live. He was angry, but I couldn't fathom how he expected me to feel anything but resentment. I didn't have the space in my heart to accommodate the child that had been born from his betrayal. This morning, he caught me in the kitchen and proceeded to berate me again. He accused me of being cruel, claiming that I was denying my daughter the opportunity to share with this girl, even though I had already made sure my daughter would be comfortable with my parents. I tried to explain to him that what he was asking of my daughter was unfair. She shouldn't have to share her life and her space with someone who had been a product of his infidelity, but all he could see was me being cruel. Am I the asshole for standing my ground on this? Should I have made my daughter share, even though it would have meant uprooting her entire life and making her feel even more alienated in her own home? Update 1. OP commented that she plans to file for divorce, so her daughter moving in with her grandparents will only be a temporary solution. Hopefully, her ex-husband won't try to stay in the family home during the 2 years this divorce process might take. If he does, it means that OP's daughter might have to continue living with her grandparents for an extended period while the other girl gets her room. I don't know the man personally, but I have to admit, I have a deep disdain for her husband. NTA, not the a-hole. The child from the affair is innocent and she needs her father. But the situation has escalated and the next step is clear. You need to divorce him. He and his daughter should find their own place to live. You and your ex-husband can sort out custody arrangements from there. Right now, the presence of this affair child has effectively displaced your 10-year-old daughter from her own room and her own home. The girl is going to be living in the space that was once your daughter's sanctuary, and now there's literally no place for your daughter to feel at home in what should still be her own house. Your daughter's belongings were taken out of her room, which felt like an important victory, but in doing so, you've also lost the greater battle, the one over your daughter's place in your own home. This is not just about moving her things. This is about her being forced out of the very space that she should feel safest in. And no, that's just not right. You can't evict your daughter, and you certainly shouldn't be pushing her out in favor of the daughter of a man who betrayed you. You need to be clear on this. Kick the cheater out, not your daughter. She should never feel like she's the one being punished in this mess. She should never have to wonder why she's not good enough to stay in her own room while the child of the affair takes her place. You need to make sure that she understands she is not the one at fault here. The one who needs to leave is him, not her. And the affair child, though innocent in all this, is not the one who should bear the brunt of the consequences for your husband's betrayal. The future might hold a time when your children and this new girl might eventually get to know each other, but that can only happen after the dust settles, after your separation and divorce. And that's a complicated, painful situation that should not be rushed. No child should be expected to instantly accept such a big change without the proper context. Your daughter will likely harbor resentment at the start, and that's completely understandable. It's hard to form a relationship with someone who represents a painful betrayal, especially when that person is thrust into her life in such an abrupt way. Lastly, I strongly advise you to get tested for STDs. It's a necessary step given the circumstances, and it's something you shouldn't put off any longer. Take care of yourself and protect your health as you begin this difficult journey of ending this relationship. Update 2. Without a doubt, you're definitely not the asshole for refusing to force your daughter to share her things with your husband's affair child. That's just basic fairness. But I have to ask, what's your end goal here? Because based on the post, it seems like you've made the decision to completely relocate your daughter to her grandparents' house. Now, while it's good that you're ensuring she keeps all of her belongings with her, I'm struggling to see how this is a sustainable solution. Moving her out of her own home just to protect her belongings doesn't seem like a fair, long-term plan. Yes, her things are safe with her, but what about her sense of stability, her sense of belonging in the home she's known? This entire situation is an emotional roller coaster for her, and while you've done the right thing in ensuring her material possessions are preserved, the emotional toll this is all taking on her should not be overlooked. Honestly, I think it's time for you to kick your husband to the curb and let him figure out how he's going to support and care for his affair child. It's clear that your daughter's well-being is now compromised in her own home, and his betrayal has fundamentally altered the dynamics of your family. He's the one who needs to take responsibility for the situation he created, not you. The decision to stay with him now seems more and more like an impossible choice, and you need to start thinking about what's best for your daughter in the long run. This is no longer just about material things, it's about emotional security, and your daughter deserves better than this. So if for some reason you're contemplating staying with him, whether out of obligation, hope, or whatever else, then you need to be honest with yourself about the logistics involved. You need to ensure that your daughter can come back home, and you need to figure out what role your husband's affair child will play in that equation. How can your daughter have her space and her peace of mind when she's expected to live in a home that has been tainted by the consequences of her father's actions? It's a delicate situation that demands clarity and careful consideration. If you stay with him, there's going to have to be a very serious, realistic conversation about how your daughter is going to feel truly welcome in her own home again, and how his affair child can be integrated into the family dynamic without further disrupting her sense of belonging. At the end of the day, it seems like you're doing what you can to protect your daughter, but this situation isn't going to resolve itself without some tough decisions. I just hope that you'll keep her well-being at the forefront of your mind when making any future choices, because this isn't just about material possessions, it's about her sense of identity and security within her family. Update 3. So his plan was to make your daughter share her things? Was that really the best he could come up with? He didn't even consider going out to buy some essentials to help his daughter get by while he figured out what else might be needed? Instead of addressing the immediate necessities of the situation, he just thought he could ask your daughter to give up her space and her belongings without a second thought. And here's the kicker. He wasn't even planning for this to be temporary, a few weeks of adjustment. No, he expected your daughter to permanently share her room with a stranger. A complete stranger, no less, who wasn't just a guest, but the child of the woman he betrayed you with. To top it all off, he didn't even think it was worth giving up his own office space to create a new bedroom for her. So not only was he imposing this on your daughter, but he was also refusing to make any sacrifices to make the situation even remotely fair. Everything about this plan was designed to tear down your daughter's sense of security, safety, and stability. To ask her to give up her space, to share her room with someone she's never met, and to allow someone else to take her place in her own home, those are things that no child should ever have to face. This wasn't a temporary solution to a difficult problem, it was a permanent disruption of your daughter's sense of self and her place in her own family. He was prepared to sacrifice her peace of mind for the sake of his affair child, and that is completely unacceptable. Yes, the daughter of the affair needs help and care, but not at the expense of your own children, and certainly not unless there is absolutely no other option. Your daughter should not have to bear the brunt of this emotional upheaval just because your husband made a choice that is now affecting everyone in the household. His actions shouldn't undermine her unless it's the last resort, and even then, there should be some kind of balance or compromise. The sheer audacity of it all is mind-boggling. To expect that he could just dictate the terms of your daughter's life without discussing it with you first, without even trying to figure things out together as a couple, that's a level of disrespect that is unforgivable. He made this huge decision, one that impacts your entire family, and didn't even have the decency to consult you on it. He didn't ask for your opinion, didn't come to an agreement with you, and just went ahead and made a unilateral decision about something so sensitive. What was his timeline for clearing out her room and getting furniture? Was there even any plan to make this transition easier for her? Because if he had planned on asking her to share her room for just a few days or a couple of weeks, then maybe, just maybe, there could have been some understanding. But this wasn't just about sharing a room temporarily. No, it was about your daughter having to give up everything. Her space, her things, her sense of belonging. He should have known that asking her to share her clothes was crossing a line. Maybe, just maybe, it would have been okay to ask her to lend a jacket, but the idea of sharing her wardrobe and other personal belongings, that was never acceptable. And let's be real, why wasn't he talking to you about any of this? Why wasn't he working together with you to come up with a plan? He was willing to make all these decisions without consulting you, and that is a major red flag. If he truly cared about how your daughter felt and how this situation affected the entire family, he would have involved you from the very beginning. Instead, he chose to handle it all on his own, making decisions that completely disregarded your input and, more importantly, your daughter's needs. Update 4. First and foremost, let's be clear. It is absolutely not your fault that your husband decided, without consulting you, to hand over your daughter's personal belongings and her room to this child from the affair. That decision was entirely his, and it highlights a lack of respect for you and your daughter, as well as a disregard for your family's well-being. He has broken the trust you once had, repeatedly it seems. And this is just another example of how little he's been considering the emotional toll his actions have had on everyone around him. It's hard to even grasp how someone could be so careless with such a delicate situation, especially when it involves a child who's already been hurt. At least having your daughter stay with your parents for the time being seems to be the more reasonable and compassionate choice. By removing her from a home that's suddenly become a battlefield for emotions and boundaries, you're giving her the peace and privacy she deserves. The thought of her being forced to share her personal space with a complete stranger, a girl she doesn't even know, especially one tied to the betrayal of her father, would surely be overwhelming. It's also a much kinder option for the other girl who's been thrust into a chaotic situation that's completely beyond her control. She shouldn't have to experience the added burden of sharing a bedroom with someone who's just been thrown into the midst of her father's mistakes. I really do feel for this child, who's only 9 years old. She's just lost her mother, and now she's been swept into a whirlwind of upheaval that she never asked for. It's incredibly unfair to her, and she is in no way responsible for the situation she's been born into. This isn't her fault, and while it's important to navigate this sensitive situation carefully, it's also essential not to project any of the pain or resentment you feel towards her. She is, after all, just a child trying to make sense of everything happening around her. That said, it's crucial to emphasize that the lack of weather-appropriate clothes for her right now is not your responsibility. Your husband is the one who took on the role of caring for this child. And as her father, he should be doing everything in his power to meet her needs. This includes providing her with the right clothing for the climate. There's no universe in which your daughter is obligated to share her personal belongings with this new half-sister because her father hasn't prioritized taking care of his children's basic needs. It's deeply unfair, and it's time to hold him accountable for his responsibilities in this. It's clear he's not handling this situation in a way that's emotionally or logistically sound, and it's important that you continue to stand firm when it comes to protecting your own child's needs. I completely understand how, in the wake of all this hurt, you might feel guarded, even resentful towards him. It's hard not to when someone you trusted has betrayed you in such a fundamental way, but I also want to gently remind you to remain mindful of how this situation impacts the girl as well. She's already in such a precarious position, caught in the middle of something she didn't choose, and now facing an entirely new set of emotional challenges. Please continue to do what you can to make sure she feels safe and secure in her environment, even as you work through your own complex emotions. While it's understandable to be angry and hurt by what your husband has done, it's important not to let that anger spill over onto this child. She's already going through so much, and your empathy and kindness could be the one stable thing she can count on in the chaos of her new life. Lastly, remember to take care of yourself. You are going through a difficult time too, and you need to ensure that you're supporting your own emotional well-being as you navigate this storm. It's not easy to balance all these emotions and responsibilities, but do your best to keep a sense of perspective and clarity. Your daughter is lucky to have you as a mother, someone who's putting her first, even in the face of such betrayal. I truly wish you and your family the best in this difficult time. You're doing everything you can to protect your children and maintain their security, and that's what matters most. Good luck with everything.